In terms of spearfishing, May has been a pretty hectic month since we're finally allowed out of the house after being on COVID-19 lockdown. In this video, I'm going to talk through some of the dives I've had here in Wellington over this month. So this first dive is actually from the end of April when New Zealand's level 4 lockdown ended. At this stage we still couldn't take boats out, so it was shore diving only. The west coast had been thrashed by some serious northerlies, so I decided to dive the harbour since it's easy shallow diving and a good way to guarantee some fish. I really like diving the harbour. Even though most of the time it has horrendous viz, you can find some really good fish in much shallower water than you would in the rest of Wellington. However, it seems this dive was right on the tail end of the harbour's season, since the tarakihi were proving quite a bit harder to track down. At the end of the dive, I was stoked to come across this decent sized goatfish. I see a lot of small goaties in the harbour, but it's not often you see a good size eating one there. About a week later, my mate Hugh and I went for a cray shore dive on the south coast. It was productive and a lot of fun, but for some reason we decided to swim 2Ks in 25 knot winds. Pre-lockdown this wouldn't have been so bad, but after a month of sitting around the house, it was pretty hard work. I had been really wanting to dive the west coast, but so far I'd been taking a beating from onshore winds, swell, and some terrible viz. On the last day of level 3, Josh and I decided to take a gamble and try shore dive Markra. We got there to find not a lot of wind, but still a decent amount of swell and some pretty bad viz. We committed and still jumped in, and it paid off big time. This day I really wanted to shoot a John Dory and possibly an end of season kingfish. We dropped some burley down on the gravel and were fighting the current, dropping down the sledge to check the burley. started off pretty depressing since there wasn't a lot around other than spotties and small blue cod. Just as I was thinking about swimming somewhere else, I dropped down and found this JD sitting right there on the burley. Stoked to get what I came for, it seemed like the best idea to stay in that spot in case another JD showed up or a kingfish rolled through. This dive, I was sitting on the bottom doing a little bit of grunting and some scratching, hoping to bring in a kingfish out of the murk, but instead, this happened. At just over 9 pounds, the snapper goes down as my best Wellington fish to date. It's hard to explain how stoked I was over this fish, since spearfishable snapper are not something we get a lot of here in Wellington, and when we do, they're normally in the peak of summer and most of them are small panties. So to shoot this fish on a shore dive in bad conditions at the end of autumn just made it that much more awesome. A few days later, I ended up buying a Haynes Hunter V19 to use for missions out wide and trips up north. Obviously, we took it out for a few test runs on the west coast, and we ended up diving Kapiti and a few of the offshore banks. Things were very quiet and I didn't shoot any exciting fish, but I really enjoy this diving for the sake of it. These rocky banks that come out of deeper water with a lot of current running over them. For the last dive in June, I got the Naiad back out on the water for the first time since lockdown. I met up with Gray and Eddie and we headed to Makara at first light. Before we even got in the water, we saw this Mako shark hanging around on the surface. Eddie managed to get this footage off the front of the boat. Not something I've ever seen here in Wellington before. At the first spot we tried, we were greeted by some nice viz for this time of year, but not many fish around. I shot this tarakihi, And then after that I couldn't really find any fish worth shooting. We then moved on to a really cool bit of reef that usually gets smoked by current. There was a decent amount of current running, but nothing too serious. We got the anchor set up so we could hang onto the boat and drop down onto the top of the reef. Eddie goes down for his first drop and shoots a kingfish, which is really cool for this time of year. I then go down for my first dive and land right on top of this big John Dory that was eating a dead crayfish on the top of the reef. Unfortunately, the dory didn't turn for me, so I had to take the classic kebab shot. But at 2.3 kgs, it's personal best JD for me. I only shot a couple of the usual suspects after the dory, but I was just really enjoying this very cool bit of reef.